Kia ora and welcome to this next episode of the Impact Collective podcast. We're here today joined with Marama Royal. Marama, what I'll get you to do is just introduce yourself.
Tēnā koe, am I looking at you? Tēnā koe, Steve. Ko māhuhu ki te rangi tōku waka, ko maunga kieke tōku maunga, ko wai te mata tōku moana, ko tūpiriri tōku tūpuna, ko Ngāti Whātua tōku iwi, ko Marama Royal ahau, ko te hea wahine o Ngāti Whātua Ōrākei Trust.
Awesome. Welcome, Marama. Thank you for taking the opportunity to sit down and have a chat to us today. A couple of the things that we've been doing in this series of podcasts is investigating community engagement and the way that we go about engaging with our community, but also moving into consultation and co-design of services. Some of the things that have been coming out a lot recently in the news is around co-governance, is around artificial intelligence, is around data sovereignty. And I've been sitting down with the team and I've said that I've been really excited about this kōrero actually, about just getting an understanding of what are some of the ways that we're able to better engage with our communities, in particular from a te ao Māori perspective. What are some of those data sovereignty issues that a lot of agencies need to kind of be aware of in the background? But I guess what I'd love to start with is just kind of getting an understanding of the place and space that Ngāti Whātua Ōrākei holds and engaging with your iwi and engaging with your whānau, and some of the challenges and some of the awesome mahi that's going on.
Ka pai. Well, all of those are great topics and also very important to us, especially around data sovereignty. So here in Tāmaki Central, which we refer to as te kahutōpuni o tūpiriri, which basically means the dog skin cloak that covers the area, the rohe that we are tangata whenua in. So we've been here for generations. Ōrākei is our ukaipo. However, Tāmaki Central is our rohe that we are kaitiaki over. We always base our values on manaaki, and so when COVID hit, that was one of the things that we responded with, was how we would manaaki our communities, our whānau, and those that work, live and play here in Tāmaki. When you're engaging with communities, obviously one of the important things is to go in with genuine reasons as to why you do that. So we always go in with tika pono me te aroha, and it's always based on the need, not on the want. Yes. And so, as I say, with COVID, it taught us a lot that we had to reach in, we had to lean in to our communities, because there were some whānau who, didn't want to engage for various reasons, and so we had to find ways on how to navigate around that. Our team within Toitoi Manawa, which is based here in Glenanis, in the heart of Ngāti Pāwa land, they learnt quite quickly. And they had to do that they had to, scale up and do things quite quickly, because unfortunately the Crown and government agencies were just a little bit behind us, and we knew that we had to get in there as quickly as possible in order to meet the needs of not only our whānau but the community that surrounds us. Genuine engagement is the way. Obviously, kanohi ki te kanohi, face to face. It's easy enough for people to pick a phone up and ring someone, but it's harder to knock on a door and engage that way. But for Māori, that is the right way to do it.
Do you think that there was an influence pre-COVID, and we managed to have some opportune conversations previously where people were mentioning too many cars up the same driveway, a distrust for a lot of these government organisations and entities? Do we think that that's been exacerbated through COVID, or do we think that actually because it's meant that it has to be locally led, it has to be local people, local faces back in there, that actually COVID's given an opportunity to get back engaged with your local communities?
I think that's probably the silver lining that came out of COVID, was that it really showed that it had to be locally led, regionally supported, centrally funded, as we've always said.
Yep.
Iwi demonstrated across the motu that they were able to reach in, not only to their whānau, but to their communities, because they knew the importance of it, but they also knew how to do that.
Yeah.
And you know, the Crown agencies and even the non-government agencies really needed to lean in on us and let us be the broker for those engagements and relationships, because we could get in there.
Yeah.
It even sort of links into, you know, data sovereignty and the importance that is to us.
Yeah.
With COVID, you know, everything was about tiaki Ngāti Whakapapa. You know, how do we keep our whakapapa safe? And how do we ensure that once we go into recovery after COVID, that continues, because it's important. Our whakapapa is important to us. The future of our mokopuna, our tamariki, is important to us. And so we had to carry that, I suppose, those learnings into the recovery phase, because even though, well, COVID hasn't left us, but even though the height of COVID has lessened, you know, we had to get back into health BAU around other vaccinations, ensuring that our tamariki's vaccinations were up to date. We're now into winter season, so you know, ensuring that our kaumātua and our pakeke are covered with flu vaccine. So the mahi continues. It's just we're just in a different lane. So yeah, we learnt a lot. Our team were amazing through COVID. They surely showed, as did other iwi groups across the motu, that, you know, iwi engagement in kaupapa like this is important, because we are the ones that will open those doors.
So one of the challenges that we were advised about, and I guess that comes in coincidence with the whole COVID situation, is just around, you've mentioned kānohi to kānohi and the importance of that, especially from a Māori perspective. Obviously, COVID created an enormous amount of challenge around that. If we're talking about caring for tūpapaku, through to tangi events, through to just regular engagements on a marae or even in a workplace environment. How did the progression operate from a Māori perspective in terms of understanding your tikanga and your kawa for a lot of those types of events, to also realising that there is a pandemic here and there's a safety first element, especially for your kaumātua who would be most at risk? Did that change the dynamic of how you were having to engage with your whānau?
Absolutely. You know, especially when we were in level 4 and level 3 lockdowns, you know, those were really hard. We lost, we lost an uncle who actually died in September, but we didn't have his tangi till December.
Oh, wow.
So, you know, we had to really be, I don't want to use the word flexible, but adaptable, I suppose, with our tikanga on how we did our tangihana, for example. And that took, 3 months. We waited because he was a rangatira to us. He was a respected kaumātua. And so the family, or the whānau, his whānau, chose to wait until we could actually have him back at our marae and hold a tangi for him. And it's amazing when you do adapt your tikanga, how, all those beautiful tohu and those atua come in and support that decision. Because when we got Uncle back to the marae, it was beautiful. It wasn't, although we knew that he had died in September and we were having his tangi in December, it didn't feel that way, because we were able to continue with our tikanga, have him at the marae. So yeah, I think just being adaptable with that. We were always aware of that ngangara COVID, and so again, our team down here at Toitoi Manawa, they were always on hand, having testing people before they came in, having, providing the masks. We practiced all of those. I mean, it wasn't our tikanga, but as I say, tiakina te whakapapa was important to us, so we had to ensure that we were following those rules because we wanted to continue our tikanga practices by holding tangi or gatherings, but also ensuring that we were following we were being compliant, because if we didn't and we became a spreader, that doesn't reflect well on us as a iwi or hapu that have been out there working within the community. So we were really, really aware of all of that. But like I say, we were adaptable, we were agile around how we did that. It was really hard because we like to touch, we like to hongi, we like to hug, and not being able to do that, or even being able to say to whānau, aroha mai whānau, but you can't go up by the whānau pani. We need to keep everything separate. Even that was really difficult, but whānau was, they were really accommodating when we did things like that, because they understood the importance of ensuring that, the future for our mokopuna, and we didn't want to be in the front page of the Herald, as a super spreader because of a gathering we held. So, it was hard, challenging, but we did it, and it was accepted in the end.
Are you finding, because across that period you would have had to have done, I mean, obviously you've given an example there where it was a delay of process as opposed to conducting it anyway. Did the move to digital technologies happen quickly for you guys? And I mean, there's the terminology of that, so 2020 with, you're still on mute. I mean, there's all of these types of situations, but how was that evolution for you guys?
I suppose at the beginning it was quite a novel thing, having been able to work from home because everyone was in lockdown or limited accessibility, being able to go. So it was a bit novel. I heard a lot of times, where there were online birthday parties and, and people having a great time being able to enjoy each other's company, even though that you're on the screen. Yeah. But over time, Tāmaki did the heavy lifting for the rest of Aotearoa for 2 years. And I think after 2 years, enough's enough. We really needed to have that contact with our whānau. We needed to be able to, like I say, touch, look at them, talk to them face to face. And I mean, we still do online things now, but it's not as much. We try to do as much face-to-face contact now, which I think is important not only for Māori, but for communities. If that's one thing Kiwis are great at, is that one-on-one or, group gatherings and coming together and just having a really good old chinwag about all sorts of things.
There was going to be a question around transitioning back. I mean, you're right, COVID hasn't gone away. It's still lurking there. We've got in the news just recently around measles in Tāmaki, again taking the brunt of what's happening. But do we see a new series into the future where it is that combination of utilising technology to its best use as well as the face-to-face, or do we go back to what we've always done?
No, I think there is a place for the online, because I think that's it just gives you another option of how you can engage with people. It may not be COVID in the future, it could be something else, and as long as we're prepared to be able to work with both technology and our old practices, I think I can't see us going back to what we knew as the norm. I think it's really, like I say, I think it's great that you have the options to be able to do, well, I think they call them hybrid options.
Yep.
I think that's great. It just shows the flexibility. And as an employer, I think it's a great option for employees to be able to have that. I grew up in the age where, we used to sign in at 8 o'clock and sign out at 5. We used to have timesheets, and you actually physically had to, I think they called it flexi time.
Yeah.
And you had to sign in and sign out.
Yep.
I would never want to go back to that. I mean, we have to be flexible to allow not only our mums and our dads, but our nans and our koros to be able to continue to work. And keep not only their mind but their bodies active with mahi.
I think a lot of these international organisations are struggling to get people to come back to the office now, so they're having the opposite effect. Before COVID, they could barely get them out, and now they're trying to get them back in again.
Yeah.
Some of this is going to end up with communities that who historically would not have been able to have been engaged with, getting more voice back into this. Some of the things that we've been challenged with in the past when it comes to community engagement, and when we talk about community engagement for us at the Impact Collective, what we're really trying to focus on here is building that trust, building the authentic relationships to then be able to move into consultation, which is discussing the what, when and whys, through to the co-design of services, which is then the implementation. And you can't do any one of those in isolation. Some of the myths that we're hearing around is that co-design and consultation is kind of your entry points. Well, if you don't have those trusted relationships, then you can't. And I think one of the things as an organisation that we've had to kind of come across and begin working with is the differences between iwi data and the importance of collation, collection and data sovereignty issues around iwi data, in conjunction with Māori data as part of a community. Now, the reason that I'm discussing that kind of distinction is because I do think that they're two separate collation efforts. A lot of the iwi data is in terms of the registries, so who's a member of your iwi and where are they located, but Ngāti Whātua Ōrākei, and I'm going to make an assumption here, and correct me if I'm wrong, not everybody's going to be located here. You'll have people that are down in Wellington, you'll have them overseas, you'll have them spread out all across the motu. And the advantage of iwi data is so that you can go along and support those that are within that. When we talk about community engagement at a community level, including Māori, the important distinction for us has been coming around and having that discussion around there could be any number of people from any number of iwi that are there. And we've been more reflective on ensuring that we are representative and over-representative of Māori in our facilitation sessions, our workshop sessions, because actually if you're living in that rohe, as opposed to you whakapapa to it or your iwi is the tangata whenua of it, the importance of bringing out that vibrancy and the community engagement from that perspective so that all of those voices are heard. Where does that align to the data sovereignty from an iwi perspective? Do you see them inherently related, or do you see them as two types of discernible data sets?
I see them as two sets because we collect, we gather our iwi data.
Yeah.
So we've got 7,500 members.
Yep.
We actually know where they all live.
Yeah.
We know how many children they have in their household.
Yep.
And that's our data. We're not going to share that with anyone else because that's for us. However, places like Toitoi Manoa, and I know that there are other hubs around. This is a great space to collect that other information, that other data that Crown agencies are, may look for, because it's a trusted, it's a trusted organisation, and people are quite willing to share that information. I think the issue is how that information is shared and what's the purpose of sharing that information, which is why we are very protective of our data. The census is just finished, and we've just run workshops with our whānau. Well, actually, I think people might call it bribing, because we were saying, come down to Whaimaia, and I think, did they come down here, Te Ara? Might have been come down here, and we were saying, and you'll get a gift card. Fill out your census, we'll help you fill out your census form, because we actually know the importance of them filling out that information, because it actually gives the Crown, the government agencies, quality data about Māori, Pacifica, other ethnic groups. So we were saying, it's important that you fill this out, so that when we go to the Crown and say we have X amount of our whānau living in poverty, what are you going to do to help us, uplift them out of that? We might know that with our data, and I can only speak on behalf of Ngāti Whātua Ōrākei.
Of course.
And we do know that. We know our whānau that are struggling, and so we build programs within our places like Tuitui Manawa and Whaimaia to try and increase income going into that household. Look at what they're paying. Putting kai on the table, is an important thing. We could actually transfer that into community by utilising iwi networks and relationships with other community groups. Like here in Tuitui Manawa, we've got Rua Pōtaka Marae just down the road, which is a community marae, who run some great programs and align, with this hub as well. We've got other groups that work within the community that we network quite well with, because we're a trusted organisation, that they know that we'll actually protect that data. However, if we need to share that data, we will have a process where we will get that consent to enable that to go through, because it's about not abdicating the Crown or the government agencies of their responsibilities to our communities. It's about advocating on behalf of those communities to ensure that they have access and equity to what is, to what they can, to help them bring themselves out of that poverty line.
One of the interesting conversations, and really important conversations, that we've heard time and time again is around community organisations in particular who are seeking to uplift the mana of their community around any manner of things. And one of the challenges that they consistently are presented with is the data, and not having quality data, or not having access to the data. Or the real kicker for some of these communities is that when they go along and they apply for funding or grants or whatever it is, that some of these agencies will turn around and say, well, that's not our data, so therefore it's not as important, or we're not going to believe it. So some of the challenges that we're having, and it's awesome and so pleasing to hear the importance that your iwi has placed on filling out the census, because there is historical ills and mistrust with central government, which has prevented people from wanting to share that intimate information. And it's what's your household income? How many whānau inside your house? Now, if you feel a little bit hoha about there being 10 people in your household when you think there should only be 5 in the house, and then you put down 5 on your census as opposed to the true number, then what that does is it paints a different picture for Crown organisations, and they leverage against that data alone. So part of the reason that we're doing what we're doing is not only are we taking the Crown and agency data and we've put it into our dashboard so that we can represent that in a way that is easy to digest, but we only see that as 50% of the journey and 50% of the story. Because actually, if you can't sit down and have the conversations with the communities, with whānau, and actually get their lived experience, you only have half the picture.
Right.
And often, half the time, that's incorrect. It's presented in a manner because of distrust. It's presented in a manner because you can present statistics in multiple ways. So for us, it's the importance of that lived experience, sitting down, having those conversations, saying, hey, we're really intrigued by this, showing that genuine curiosity. So the fact that you're able to sit down and have these conversations with whānau, get them around the table and explain to them, hey, this is really important. Like it or not, unfortunately, a lot of decisions are made without us. We need to seek about correcting that so that no decision is made without us. But whilst we're on that journey, we need to paint as honest a picture as possible so that decisions aren't made in a way that's almost congruent with it not being supportive.
Yeah, well, it'll be the wrong decision because they don't have the right information.
Correct.
And that's why that's why I go back to your first point around trust and confidence.
Yeah.
If you don't have that trust and confidence, you won't get quality engagement.
Exactly.
And if you don't get quality engagement, you don't get quality information.
Correct.
And so all of those, there's an impact on how you do all of those. And as I say, the team down here are trusted within this community.
Yeah.
And that's because of how they've engaged with the community. And so people will come down and visit and will tell their story. So, and I'm sure it's with other examples across the motu. It's just how do you actually gather that information? I mean, this is a great start, doing some podcasts around the Impact Collective stuff that you guys are doing, because people are able to tell their stories. And be able, you can hear the context and the narrative behind some of those successes, and then elevating that up to the right ears and to the decision makers to say, this actually works. As we said, locally led, regionally supported, centrally funded. It works. And I don't know how many examples they need to see. This is not about funding something for the sake of funding. Yeah. This is about funding iwi who have done the mahi for the last 4 years around COVID response, into COVID recovery, into health BAU. And I don't know how else we could paint the picture to show how successful it is. And that the continuation of funding programs like this, the importance of that. I know that health is a huge kaupapa, not only for the government, but for those that live, for Kiwis in general, it's a big issue. But we have the answers, and all they need to do is come and talk to us. Come and find out what has been successful, what has not been successful, and what have we learnt from it. There'll be thousands of stories to tell.
Absolutely. What is the best way for a community organisation or agency or Crown agency to go about authentically connecting, so that we don't get multiple cars up the driveway, we don't end up with this exacerbation of engagement fatigue, where people have been asked the same question time and time again through multiple agencies, where we can have those trusted places. How can an authentic partnership approach be conducted from, in particular, agencies that are not iwi Māori driven?
I think, the creation of places like this is a great start, because this is not just around COVID response, which it originally became. As I said, it moved into the COVID recovery, then it moved into the health BAU. And within all of that, we've built this alliance with different agencies, government agencies, community groups, church groups, you know, all the different groups that work within communities that provide support and you know, to whānau. And so you build this alliance, and so when you start to engage with a particular whānau who has multiple needs, you actually have a one-stop shop in that sense. So you bring the services in so that there's, you know, so there's not 10 cars up the driveway.
Yeah.
You know, if the one good thing about with COVID response and reaching into those hard to reach communities in whānau was the ability to be mobile. Now, there's no reason why you can't have a mobile one-stop service at all.
Yeah.
You know, the team down here, they run body wafts, and they bring all the different health services in. You know, when you go around and you know, I mean, I come down and do it. I love it. You know, you have all sorts of different services that I probably wouldn't reach into.
Yeah.
And because it's a trusted organisation, people from the community will just walk in, because they know that once they walk in, you know, they're going to be supported. They're going to be, you know, they're going to be given the right support to go around and do this, you know, and engage and interact with these different services that are not only going to be helpful for them but for their whānau. So yeah, it's those sorts of initiatives that work, and we, you know, it's you don't have to reinvent the wheel.
No, well, no, you don't. And what's super exciting about the kaupapa that you guys are doing down in this hub in particular, and is so closely aligned to what we at the Impact Collective, the stories that we're trying to progress and demonstrate, is that health is not health is not health. Mm-hmm. And what you've demonstrated here in this community hub is the fact that it is about the community coming together. It is about whānau being able to access healthcare services, but that's only one element.
It's only one element.
You've got access and instigating quality kai here. Mm-hmm. You've got education being able to be supported here. We've got oranga tamariki. We've got justice who are looking at affiliating. You've got traditional rongoa and mirimiri on site. You've got a team that are here supporting the events. I mean, it's all different elements that comprise of not only what it takes to be a person, an individual, but also that wraparound of a whānau, and then to a community level. And it's super exciting to see that it's not just, for want of a better terminology, siloing up. Yeah. It's non-organisational silos, because you've got the many different and it's non-territorial. You're bringing in everybody from around you. And it's so encouraging to see that this format can work. And despite the fact that it's almost phoenix from the ashes of what was COVID, and we've traditionally always heard from emergency services and, bless them, but local councils in particular, this essence that this type of intersectorial, inter-organisational type of cooperation only ever happens in an emergency.
Yeah.
You can only ever work like this when stuff can happen really rapidly, and only when there's an emergency. And what you've been able to demonstrate here is actually, no, we took this, we leveraged against it, we re-engaged with our community in an authentic manner to build the trust, to then be able to, in a consultation model, sit down with them and listen robustly. Yeah. What is it that you need? Yeah. And the beauty of this place is that you can ebb and flow. You go, oh, actually, that service is probably not what our whānau are asking for, but there's a huge demand in this area. Yeah. We're going to bring them on board into the hub, and they effectively become spokes to that wider wheel. Through to, so you had that, into your co-design phase where you sat down with your community and said, what does this look like? Yeah. And that three progression, and I harp on about this all the time, you have to start with a position of authentic trust. to be able to have the conversations to then develop and design those services. That seems to me not only the only way for success, but it seems like you guys have been doing this for generations.
Generations, yeah.
You know? So trying to align a mainstream scenario to something that Te Ao Māori worldview's been there for generations doing.
Well, you raised it earlier in your kōrero about uplifting, the mana of whānau, of the community. And if you have a look at the word manaaki tangata, which is to support and care, for people. If you have a look at it and you break it down, it's almost mana ki te tangata, which is about the empowerment of people to take control of their own destiny with the support of those that can provide those services to them. It's as simple as that. When I get a toothache, I go to the dentist. When I get a sore puku, I go to the doctor. But if I need some really good holistic, wairua support, where do I go? I go to my whānau. That's where I go. And so it's a natural pathway for Māori to, and our Pacifica cousins are the same.
Yeah.
They practice the same. It's a natural pathway for us to go down that. Build the trust and confidence. Get through the door, kuhu mai, come in. And we always take kai with us because kai is a great door opener.
Absolutely, yep.
Kai is always a great door opener. And, kuhu mai, come in. And then let us walk alongside you.
There's a bit of a myth that's out there with respect to it, though, that it costs too much in terms of the time invested to build those natural, authentic relationships. I would argue, and I have argued...
Well, the cost is time, really, isn't it?
Well, it is time. But how much time do you save by doing it up front and building that trust, as opposed to trying to do it while you're processing and progressing all of this stuff? Yeah. And actually, it's going to be more successful.
Absolutely.
Because you've got those trusted relationships. Yeah. You know what you're doing, and you know why you're doing it. And from your kōrero today, what I've heard is that actually everything that you're doing here is whānau-centric, and you recognise that all the community is, and all hapu is, and all iwi is a combination of multiple whānau.
Yeah,
and
just a wider whānau.
Exactly. So being able to get down and having those conversations to understand what that looks like, and giving them that opportunity to have a voice and feel heard.
Absolutely. And
part of the amazing mahi that our creative director Caleb King has been doing is going out and being able to sit alongside and authentically share the taonga that is some of these stories that would have the ability to go along and support. But we also make sure that we take that and it's not just left in an ether, that we do go along and build them into the reports. And having a charitable cause, in which case we're going along and doing what we've set out to achieve, which is presenting that community level intelligence so that organisations have the ability to pick up the report and go, right, there's some real opportunities here that we can work on, or there's some really good baseline data here that we can leverage against, and it can't be argued against.
Yeah, and there's some real success stories.
Absolutely.
It has to be built on those because the future of community care and quality community care, in my view, sits within organisations like this. And whether the government remains or there's a new government in November, this has to be transferable. It has to be. There's no, in my view, there's no question. It's got to be transferred across and continued, because it is the hope and the livelihood of our communities, not just our whānau. I'm talking about our communities that will be at stake.
So, if you had the ability to tell people that are seeking to do that engagement? Because, I mean, ultimately where this is coming from is a real position of agencies talking a big game about community engagement, and that's where they need to be focused. Because they know rightfully that without that, then they can't do service design or development or shift the equilibriums of some of the services that are going on and some of the errors of the past. What is the way, from your perspective, that organisations can do that authentically without it being what sometimes it's perceived as, which is just a tick box exercise?
It's about building those relationships with organisations like this, being part of that alliance, being part of that network. Instead of focusing your funding streams into this, take a look at this design and see what your investment will return if you go down this pathway. That's the, and as I keep saying, it will be successful if everyone hops on the same waka and has the same focus around
paddles in the same direction.
Yeah, and all paddles in the same direction. We all want to be in the same waka. We don't want people going down in a whirlpool or the one waka going that way or one capsized. We all want to be on a cruise ship.
Yeah.
All going in the same direction. That is success. And that's Māori success, iwi success, community success. It's as simple as that.
So if I was a community organisation seeking to engage with Ngāti Whātua Ōrākei around the mahi that you're doing here in this hub in particular, what would be the best way that they could connect in and support? Because what I hazard a guess has historically happened, because we've had our experience as well, is that people come with their own, this is what I'm seeking to get out of this, rather than this is what I'm seeking to garner an understanding of and participate and actually be part of that living membrane that becomes that.
It's Tiara and her team down here, the door's always open. Come down, have a cup of tea. As I said, Kai is a great door opener. Come down, have a cup of tea and have a kōrero. And bring what you can add to the to what's here. But if you have a need as well, let us know what that is. And how can we actually start to thread you and weave you into that, so that your needs are met, but what you bring also adds value to what's happening here. Whānau, like you said, whānau-centric, whānau-focused, that's what the whole kaupapa is about. It's not about building silos and trying to do things in an individual manner. It's a collective, as I said, it's an alliance. And it was built from our COVID response. And even though we are not in COVID response anymore, we're in, I think we might be sort of quite down the line around recovery, but there's still all the other stuff that we need to do. And as I say, that's about ensuring that our whānau have access and equity to everything that they should have available to them. And this is the funnel. This is the brokering organisation that will be able to do that, not only for agencies but for the community.
The adage of for Māori by Māori shifted in my experience when we were in COVID for by Māori for everyone. And I experienced that firsthand very, very clearly in Hawke's Bay, in Ahuriri, and then up in Bay of Plenty, actually, it was around kai distribution. How is that working in a community setting that is iwi-led here in Tāmaki? Is the door always open for anybody?
Absolutely, absolutely. As a trust, as Ngāti Whātua Ōrākei Trust, we you know, we had a responsibility to our whānau. So we, you know, some of our investment into our whaimaia team was in order to ensure that our whānau had access to kai.
Yeah.
And then down here at Toitoi Manawa, at the hub, theirs was the community response to ensure that community had access to kai. Because our whānau, we were able to look after our whānau. Yeah. We've got a beautiful community garden up at Pourewa that they harvest every Friday, and that's open to community. And so if you go up there 1 o'clock on a Friday, the cars are, you know, there's lines of cars and people are out with their, you know, with their New World and Countdown shopping bags, and they go and they just pick fresh kai from the garden.
So good.
From lettuce through to kumara, to carrots, right through to, you know, kale, I think they call it, yeah. So, you know, and it's great. It's all, you know, it's all free.
That's so cool.
But that's a way to give back to the community.
Absolutely.
And if you go up and have a look at it, I mean, it's a huge community garden.
Well, we would, Marama, but Tamaki put the weather on for us today.
Yeah, we've got a storm coming in.
We've got a storm coming in and it's pouring down with rain outside. It's really interesting that that's actually successful, and I don't mean that facetiously. The number of community organisations that I've spoken to that have said that community gardens are created with the best of intent, but they never work. And it's because everybody has to put into the bucket in order to be able to make it successful. So it's awesome to hear of a community garden that's actually really successful.
Yeah, and we've built it on our maramataka as well. Yep. So, you know, we've gone right back to our true kaupapa. And so it's the mara is actually done using the maramataka.
That's so cool.
But yeah.
That's really cool.
It's wonderful because you see all these, you know, people from Kohi Marama and St Heliers and they come up and they get kai from our garden and we love it. So it's open to anyone. Yeah,
very cool. Well, we've had an awesome kōrero around community engagement, making sure that that is front and centre in terms of building those trusted relationships. We've had a conversation today around whānau-centric. We've had a conversation, albeit briefly, around data sovereignty, but I think that it's a topic that is going to come to the fore more as we start to see disruptive technologies coming through. And I mean, we're in phase 1 of AI, lived realities at the moment, where ultimately I think we're heading to a political elections, if not this one, certainly the next one, which is completely AI in the way that it's conducted. But the reason that I bring that up is around data sovereignty, because unless if it's in a lock box somewhere and it's very specific access, I'm unclear yet, and I think this is part of the ethics of what will go through, is how AI would be accessing these types of data sets, whether it's been given access or if it's garnered access, don't know. Yeah. And I think that that's going to come to the fore more and more, especially as iwi across the country are becoming into post-settlement entities and are seeking to support and learn and grow, especially around their iwi membership and what that looks like and how that they can best support them going forward, and whether or not that data is locked down and how it is.
Yeah, look, I'm not a tech expert at all. You know, I think I need a book on, you know, what is it? Digital for Dummies, I think it is for me. I mean, I still write it in a diary. You know, it's just old habits. But yeah, it is a bit scary. You know, how people can access data. We, you know, obviously try to put as much security as we can around our data to protect our whānau.
This comes back to that comment that you made earlier around data and usage.
Yeah.
Like, it's okay if there's permissions granted, that there's safety nets in place.
Yeah, that's right.
But ultimately, those two things only occur if, what's the kaupapa that you're trying to do with this data? What is it that you're seeking to understand? And more so, how is that then going to be used?
Which is why we encouraged our whānau to complete the census.
Yeah.
And only we could do that with our whānau.
Correct.
And even though, we gave them some little incentives, but for us it was important that they completed that data, because then that's the Crown's responsibility to hold that data.
Absolutely.
But also it gives them a true picture of how iwi are placed with their whānau. We are actually listed on our own, Ngāti Whātua Ōrākei, so they can pick that as their iwi, which is great, because as the information starts to come in, we can then go into Statistics New Zealand and pull down and say, we've got 7,500 members registered, but this is telling us that we've got 8,000 members, so we've got a missing 500.
Yeah.
So how do we actually start to find them?
Yeah.
So that's why we were, we're really keen to understand that.
It impacts so much. I can't emphasise the amount that it implements, and it goes along and it determines how healthcare, vote health is spent. It sets up where schools are going to be placed, how many teachers are required. It goes along and supports policing requirements, like housing, kāinga ora, all of these Crown agencies that rely on this data. And if it's a false picture, services are going to be developed or funding is going to go to areas that otherwise should have gone elsewhere.
Yeah.
But they don't know.
Yeah.
There's no picture there.
Yeah.
And I think there needs to be a combination, and the Impact Collective for the wider motu is another tool in the kete. It's not the be-all and end-all, but if you combine the community level insights and intelligence that we've been able to bring to the table in a non-partisan approach, if you bring together the data that you've got from your iwi registers, if you bring together the Stats NZ data, all of these different data points to create a really robust picture of what that community looks like, you're going to be inherently better off as a community.
Absolutely. I mean, we can, like I say, we hold our data for our iwi. So we understand, like I say, we actually know how many kids are doing NCA level 1, level 2, level 3. That's how deep dive, we can go.
Yeah.
But we won't, that's not information that we would share.
No.
Unless we had trust and confidence in an agency around the sharing of that information.
Absolutely.
Like for education, for example.
Yeah.
We've insured all our whānau members with comprehensive health insurance through NIB.
Wow.
So, our whānau no longer have to wait on public waiting lists if they require, surgery.
Yeah.
And we did that in order to give them mana motuhake over their own health.
Cost
but
doesn't
it
need
was
to be a
not,
barrier.
but it's not abdicating the health responsibility.
Yeah.
Because they have a responsibility to all New Zealanders, including Ngāti Whātua Ōrākei whānau members. The fact that we've got NIB insurance for them should not abdicate them of that responsibility. So, but, for us it was about mana motuhake, tino rangatiratanga for them in their healthcare. We're building more papakainga homes.
Yeah.
But that's not abdicating kainga ora of their responsibility to help fund us to build more homes here in Tāmaki. It's all of that.
Yeah.
We're very fortunate as an iwi, but also we face a lot of challenges, because even though we only have this very small piece of Tāmaki, which is Tāmaki Central, and it's only a very small piece of it, everybody wants a part of it. And so, we have to put resources into trying to protect our borders, to ensure that what we can gain through our commercial arm in building pūtea will uplift our whānau in wealth, health, and harmony.
Absolutely.
And living.
Yep.
Then that's why we are very protective of our rohe. We don't do any business outside of Tāmaki. It's all in Tāmaki.
Wow.
But because but what we do provide is for our whānau who live
All over the show.
all over the show.
Yep.
You know, even overseas.
Yeah, very cool.
Yeah.
I think there are going to be conversations going forward which are going to be tricky for not only iwi, but also for Crown agencies, for community organisations, as we're starting to see more and more media coming down the co-governance conversation. And I know it's topical, but I guess what does that look like for you going forward in terms of access to data, good example, access to funding, another good example, kaitiaki of this whenua that you guys reside within and sit upon. What does it actually mean?
Yeah, I think co-governance, for me, it's a real colonial term. And as you know, there are two views on the tiriti o Waitangi. And the tiriti o Waitangi document, in our view, reads very differently to the English version.
Yeah.
So that's the first point around the name co-governance.
Yeah.
We've actually, it's interesting because Ngāti Whātua Ōrākei we've been actually practicing co-governance with Auckland Council probably for the last 25, 26 years.
Yep.
With the establishment of the Ngāti Whātua Ōrākei Reserves Board.
Yes.
So when Takaparawhau or Bastion Point, that became the first Waitangi Tribunal claim, which was Y1. When it was returned back to Ngāti Whātua, the first thing we did was gift it back to the people of Auckland and said that it would never be developed. It will always remain whenua rangatira.
Yep.
And of course, with that came a legislation called Ngāti Whātua Ōrākei Reserves Board Act,
Yep.
which is a co-governance model
Yes.
that we've been practicing for the last 26 years. So we have a Ngāti Whātua Ōrākei Reserves Board that has 3 Ngāti Whātua board members and 3 council
Yep.
members. And we receive pūtea through Auckland Council, and people say, that belongs to ratepayers. And I go back to them and say, well, actually, we are the biggest ratepayers here in Tāmaki Central, Ngāti Whātua Ōrākei, because of the land holdings we have. And we've never defaulted on our rates, and we pay in the millions. So I don't apologise at all for getting budget from Auckland Council in order for us to do stuff on our whenua rangatira or Pourewa, which is where our community garden is.
Absolutely, yeah.
And it's done through a co-governance model. So all the decision making is made at the Reserves Board.
Yep.
And then we do a long-term, we do an LDP that we have to present to council every year.
Yep.
There are annual plans and there are long-term budgets that we also put through.
Yeah.
And what we ensure is that all projects that are set in place for whenua rangatira, which is Takaparawhau, Bastion Point, and Pourewa, that they are started and completed. Because it is about the enhancement of both those whenua.
Sorry,
it's about the replanting of natives.
Yeah, my laughing was the fact that it takes a co-governance approach to see completion of tasks. It's an interesting dynamic, really.
So, I mean, like I say, we've been operating in a co-governance model, and it's worked for us.
Yeah.
There have been some challenges along the way,
Of course,
because council machinery, when it comes to getting pūtea out of them, it's like drawing blood. Whereas, but we've jumped those hurdles, we've got through those barriers, and we've set up funding agreements. But what that's been enabled us to do is enabled us to employ our whānau, to put them back onto our whenua, to work our whenua and do some really great stuff. So that's what that's enabled us to do. Put more of our whānau into employment and put them on the land where they want to be and grow kai, produce native trees that get planted across Tāmaki.
Yeah.
and bring in some real horticultural and landscaping experts. Phil Goff, when he was mayor, his vision was to plant 1 million trees. Well, we were part of that plan. And half the trees that have gone out across Tamaki have come from our little native nursery, which is done through the co-governance model. So, yeah. So
I guess it's an interesting take on the fact that this has been around and it's been done and it's been demonstrated. It's not new. It's the right way to go about things, and it doesn't need to be scary. And I think there's a little bit of that that's going out there at the moment, which is a little bit of, this is going to be terrifying if we let co-governance happen, rather than acknowledging the fact that it's not only is it the right way to go about it, but it's kind of a necessary element of going forward.
Yeah. As I say, I don't think it's the perfect co-governance model, but it has worked for us for 20 odd years, and we're still in that model. Yeah. If you scale it up to another level, there could be difficulties, because then you start to move into sort of the iwi politics area around status of tangata whenua, and borders start to come into play. So all of that starts to come into play, which we see here quite often in Tamaki. Around who is seen as mana whenua here in Tamaki. And we acknowledge that we've got whanaunga on all our borders, south, west, east, and we acknowledge them. But we do not acknowledge those iwi who claim an interest in Tamaki but live outside of it. Yeah. And don't have marae here. Yeah. So, and that's when I talk about the protection of our borders. That's when we are quite protective of that.
Does this come back to that conversation that we've been having, though, that it needs to be locally led?
Absolutely. Yeah. And that, again, if there's one thing that COVID taught us as an iwi, is that when we went into lockdown, even at level 3 or level 4 was really evident, everybody went home.
Yeah.
And we were in and we were like, oh my goodness, everybody retreated back to their border, back to their own sort of tūranga waiwai. Yeah. And it really clearly demonstrated to us that we are the tangata whenua of Tamaki Central and the Ahika here, because we were the only ones that kept the home fires burning. So,
sometimes quite literally with home firewood supplies are here as well. Oh, very cool. It's been absolutely awesome to be able to sit down and have these conversations in an open forum where some of the myths that go on around some of the stuff, and it's always going to be challenging because it becomes heated in some elements, it becomes controversial, it becomes a hot topic, it becomes political cannon fodder, depending on which way you look at it. And it's nice to get a balanced approach to actually, if we all kind of sit down and we again go back to building those trusted relationships, a lot of this stuff flows naturally. Aye. It just makes it easier for not only ourselves but also for the communities of which we reside in. How we like to go about bringing these together is we put you on the spot, and I love doing this to people. And what we asked, and I've asked our last two podcast members with Gareth Hughes and Justin Lester the same question that I'm going to pose to you, and it's a take on Tim Ferriss, who is an international best-selling author on a book that he collaborated on, is probably the best way to put it, called Tribe of Mentors, where he went around and he collated stories and asked 11 questions of just world experts, and you name it, he brought it all together. Dalai Lama through to sports people, through to big world business people. And one of the questions that he asks is, if you could have a billboard anywhere in the world that would be seen by billions of people, what is the message that you would put onto that billboard, and why? So with Gareth, we we had a conversation around actually the economy can change. So rather than being focused solely around wealth progression, that actually it needs to consider people and our environment and sustainability and whole order in its natural essence. With Justin, it came down to what we've got now is okay, but things can change and it will be okay. Change doesn't have to be scary. And I think that's actually reflective of the conversation we've had today as well. Change is going to happen, but it will be okay. What would the message that you could get out to millions or billions of people be?
That's a really good question. It's quite a... I think I'd probably go down the Indigenous line and say, look to your Indigenous cultures for the answers.
Good way.
So look back to and look back to the past to enable the present to look to the future.
Awesome. Thank you. It's been great.
Kia ora. Ngā mihi.